All right, hello out there to literally some viewers. Thank you for viewing my videos over the past couple of weeks. I really appreciate your support and your interest in my crappy little YouTube channel about speakers, fun speakers, essentially speakers you can use without a subwoofer. You can plop them down and listen to them. Today we're going to be reviewing the Dayton MK442 transmission line tower. And we're going to talk a little bit about transmission lines first. So you see this Bose wave radio that I have here. This is it's about from 2001 or so. You've got an aux input still, so you can, if you find one of these on Craigslist, which, you know, honestly, for the price of Bluetooth speakers these days, you pick one of these up for like $100, get a little Bluetooth module that plugs into the aux input. You have a hell of a little bedroom system. This is actually a really cool speaker. This is a transmission line speaker like the Dayton, and it's probably one of the most famous transmission line speakers, the Bose wave radio. Back in the 90s, if you ever stayed up past 11 p.m., you would catch a Bose ad, at least in America, about the Bose wave radio and its amazing sound. Even back in the day, they had Herbie Hancock doing ads for them for their bigger wave radio. I think they were selling both at the time, but there were literally infomercials throughout the 90s and 2000s from Bose about these things for years and years and years. And if you remember the ad, you know, it's like, why waste all this space and have these huge, gigantic speakers, and it would be this huge 80s style component system when you can have all this sound in the Bose wave radio. And they were about $500 back in 2001 when this came out. And that's, you know, it's quite a bit for a clock radio. You know, it is a pretty cool little device though. Let's see, this one is hang on. Looking. This is an AWR CC1, which is the one you want. The earlier ones actually had one of these drivers as, you can see there are two little 2.5-inch drivers, full range drivers here. So the early ones had one of these as a bass driver and one of these did the upper and the mid. So you'll see on the earlier ones, there's a little slot cutout for the port on the bass one. This is, both of them are full range drivers, better design, pretty cool. And then you have your transmission line system in here, and basically you have the backwave energy from these speakers fed in these sort of tunnel-like things that exit right in the middle. So you have one on each side, and that amplifies your bass, and it gives you really deep bass. For 2.5-inch drivers, I've seen people measure these to maybe about 100 hertz, which is pretty good. I don't know if it goes exactly that low, but it certainly feels that way. You get a lot of, if you were like, for instance, you needed a sound system for your garage, perfect. Your bathroom, your mind will be blown rocking out to like Queen with this thing in the shower. It is an awesome little device. You can basically turn it up as loud as you want. Bose makes a lot of really idiot-proof products, so you can really blast the shit out of this thing, and you're really not going to harm it. This particular wave radio I spent the past 2 or so years in my little sister's bedroom, blasting Cardi B at ear-splitting volumes, and it still is completely fine. So, you know, essentially what a transmission line is you are in some respects violating what's called the inverse square law. Inverse square law, a point source like a speaker or a light bulb, for instance, as it expands into three-dimensional space, dims, right? So what you're doing in basically making a little sort of rat maze behind these speakers and forcing the air to go through these these tunnels that have a given volume, you're essentially amplifying the deepest bass tones. Very cool design. I don't know who invented it, but I know Bose used transmission lines for a lot of their designs, especially early on. It's sort of a cheater way of getting deep bass out of small drivers, like the Dayton we're going to talk about here in a second. So what is the deal with these? So these Daytons are the big version of the MK402 that I reviewed last time. So these are not powered, so they are running off of my Cambridge Audio AXR100 right now. 100 watts a channel, so you know, really, especially for this small space, it'll, you know, blow your hair back, and with volume, you really don't need that kind of power in this kind of space. But I do like the amp. It is a nice sounding amp, and I will always, you know, say the remote does suck. If you buy one of those Cambridges, awesome amp, remote is terrible. It just even, you know, I sit probably maybe 6 feet away, still doesn't work that well. Not into the remote. Amp is great. But anyway, these are 4 ohm speakers. So they will need a higher current amp that, you know, has some significant power in the 4 ohm range. They are cheap speakers. So, you know, running them with this Cambridge is a little bit of overkill. But if you run, you know, basically any speaker with a nicer amp, you are going to get a nicer result. You know, obviously you run into the law of diminishing returns that you can't just get the nicest amp and the crappiest speakers and they're going to sound awesome. But you'd be surprised how well or how good you can get cheap speakers to sound on a nice amplifier. These, you know, like I said, $200 a pair from Parts Express, or Dayton Audio is the brand that makes them, which is their sort of in-house brand. And you know, I've had mixed experiences with a lot of their stuff. Mostly good. They make some killer cheap stuff. I bought the B652 Airs when they came out, and I thought those were pretty cool and pretty groovy for 60 bucks. But they were like fun toys. I wasn't like blown away by them. The MK402, which you guys saw, I was actually genuinely quite impressed for the $100 that you spend on those things. And so it made me interested in this MK442. And you know, I've always liked transmission lines. I've had Vandersteens, which are transmission lines. I've had a lot of transmission line design speakers, and I think they're great. So I bought these. So first up, I think you're gonna see in the title of this video, you know, these speakers are great for multimedia. For, you know, your streaming shows, TV, movies, video games. These things are awesome. That's probably the highlight of this speaker, is that they really shine when you're watching TV, you're playing video games. Let's see here. I have some of the, you know, some of the stuff that I really enjoyed on these speakers. And what I've done is I've made a collaborative playlist, so you can actually add to this playlist. I'll link it down in the comments here. But I've made a short playlist of songs and tracks that really shine on this speaker for me. You know, I think the one person this speaker is for sure, and the one person that will really enjoy this speaker, is someone who's looking for a sub soundbar type combo, but doesn't really want to go with a soundbar and wants something that sounds nice for music. These speakers, I'm telling you, it's going to be better than a lot of, I would say, like $400, $500 and cheaper sound sub-bar combos. I'm not really a huge sub or soundbar fan in the first place. Some of them do sound pretty pleasant and pretty nice. But generally speaking, you don't get the stereo separation. You get some whiz-bangery, and you get some effects with the different sort of speaker systems that they do have, and the DSP, the digital signal processing, and that kind of stuff they do with the sound. So you do get some extra versus a stereo, but mostly when you have a stereo setup, it's going to sound better. And the cool thing about these is you get that subterranean bass, you get that deep bass. There isn't a huge amounts of weight here, I would say. In terms of weight, the mid bass is about as weighty as the CAF Q150, but they go down to 40 hertz, which the CAF just can't touch. And it really gives these speakers, I'm not comparing them to the CAF. I originally was going to compare them to the CAF, but the CAF is much nicer in the upper ranges, and these are very nice speakers, not offensive sounding, not too overly bright, not too, never shouty. They don't really commit any speaker offenses that I would consider a deal breaker. That's the first thing. I think they're very neutral sounding speakers. They're very nice sounding speakers, and they don't really sort of advertise their cheapness in such a way that you can hear it that well. You're mostly just, wow, these are nice speakers. I've been playing The Last of Us Part 2 on these things. Awesome for that game. You get the great sound effects when the action scenes happen, the huge, the zombie attacks, all that kind of stuff. These are really fun for The Last of Us Part 2. I really enjoyed these speakers for that. What else we have on our not music list? Westworld was awesome on these speakers. A lot of the dun-dun, that kind of like deep bass sort of transition when something's happening. These things punch those kind of effects out really well. You get a lot of involvement with action scenes. That deep bass that's still on axis, it's still above the -3 point at 40 hertz. You do get a lot of goodies in that range that you don't get with something like the CAF. Like I said, the CAF is a nicer speaker overall, but the deepest bass the CAF just can't touch, and it's it's a different design. It's a ported design versus transmission line design. So you have two 4-inch woofers here connected in this transmission line cabinet, and then you've got a front exiting port, so you can put these pretty close to the wall. I do recommend putting them somewhat close to the wall. I had them where the CAFs were, which I think were about 40 inches from the rear wall, 42 I think inches, and I have these at about probably half that distance, and you get the sort of desired effect from these speakers. I really can't advertise enough how good these are for watching TV, watching action movies, watching films. I was watching Ford versus Ferrari on these. Really fun for stuff like that. All those deep guttural, race car engine noises. A lot of the effects that you get in those racing scenes. Really involving. Really sort of. I didn't miss my 5.1 system all that much. Yeah, the effects you don't get. You don't get the surround sound effects with basically any stereo. You get some of that, imaging sort of stuff that is kind of a surround effect and it sounds good. But, obviously you don't have speakers behind your head, so you don't get that effect. But these are really involving for stuff like that. And, if you're going for if you're going to spend $500 on a soundbar, or $400 on a soundbar, I'd spend $200 on these and $200 on an amplifier, and you would be quite happy. I'm a strong advocate for not necessarily going with soundbar solutions. I know when they work, they work. Stuff like the Bose Wave Radio, when it works, it works. I was watching some random YouTube that was just auto playing at some point. I'd fallen asleep. It's this guy camping and living in a van. He's got like a Vanagon, and he's living in one of those 1980s Vanagon Westphalias. If I was traveling around and living in something like that, this would be my sound system, for sure. You can get nice and loud, really jam out. The deep, not the deepest bass tones obviously aren't there, but there's enough bass that you can really enjoy it as a full range product. And you can jam out and just kind of kick back, relax. This is actually really fun for classical music. Fun fact, Dr. Bose was a huge classical music fan. And so if you listen to classical music on a lot of his products, you understand, wow, a lot of the weird direct reflecting kind of stuff really works for that orchestral type of music. And these, quartet on this little thing is actually really nice. The cello actually comes out, you can hear violas, you can hear deep strings, you can hear atmosphere, you can hear room. The cool thing about that transmission design is those lowest notes that those speakers can make are really still pushed out and nice. They still have volume on the way out of the port. And so you get that kind of, you get those room effects. You can hear those bass notes sort of die and that kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm not comparing these two either, but for a 2.5 inch drivers, this thing really kicks out some sound, and it's fun to listen to. I can enjoy it as a product alone, and it's like one of those things with when they call it musical, and this is a musical product. It's fun to listen to music on, and I can just enjoy it by itself. Same thing with cars. They talk about grip versus handling, right? A Miata doesn't have all the grip in the world, but handling the feel of the car as it's traveling through the corners. is a lot of what it's about for a lot of enthusiasts, and that certainly is the case. This is a fun product, and know where your product, what's good for. Shower radio, garage radio, traveling around in a van, you can jam out, awesome product. So again, these things, if you're considering a soundbar and you don't really want one, and you actually want to listen to music as it was intended, in stereo, and really kind of have those moments where you're listening to vinyl, you're listening to CDs, you're listening to your classical music, you're listening to 70s rock and roll, whatever you want to do, this is an awesome alternative. It really is. They are a little light. They, as you can see, they're not on spikes. They have sort of rubber stops on them. And if we move this guy to the side here, you're not getting a hefty speaker. It's not hugely hefty, and we've got these little sort of stubs on the bottom, if you can see them there. That's they it stands on, so you can put it on tile, or you can put it on a hard surface, or you can put it on carpet, but it's not a spike, so it doesn't exactly stay in place perfectly, but it is adequate. What you would get for $200. This thing, it came out of the box smelling a little bit like shop glass, like freshly cut wood. It is it is a cheap product, but the veneer fits pretty nicely, and the sound is great.